Hello everyone. I didn't expect to have another video up so soon after the last one, but I already had an idea of what I wanted to do this month, and I already had this list lying around, so I figured we'd do something more fun than educational. There will be a smattering of educational references in here still, just because your smart older sister can't help herself, but I hope we don't lose sight of this being fun. So if you haven't already guessed from the title of this video, I'm going to be listing horror movie recommendations that I think you should watch this month. If your constitution isn't really up for horror content, I suggest you check back next month. Take this as a clear content warning. From this point on, that watching further may expose you to frightening material. If it isn't already clear, we love being smart on this channel, and it's always smart to take care of yourself. Please assess whether you should rightly continue watching, considering how you're feeling and your current circumstances. The days are getting colder, the leaves are beginning to change, and while many where I'm from are counting the days to Christmas, I'm much more preoccupied with the immediate event happening this month. While I'm still quite serious about paying the proper respects to the dearly departed on October 31st and November 2nd, that's right, oh men of the West, Halloween is really not a night to be out on the town partying. Unlike Ghost Month, I think October is a time to really get into the spirit of spooky season, to contemplate and appreciate the aspects of the supernatural immortalized in film. Maybe next year we can do a weekly book or television series recommendation, but for now, let's focus on movies. For those of you who aren't already horror fans, you may be wondering, why do people love this genre? And what would it benefit me to partake this month? Well, to answer the first question succinctly, because horror as a genre is fucking awesome. Sure, that's just my personal opinion, but it is the correct one. Adding to that, there's a bunch of research that explains this attraction. In 1992, Michael J. Apter published The Dangerous Edge, The Psychology of Excitement. And while there have been many books and papers discussing this topic before and since, this is still the one I come back to. The core idea of this book is that people can enjoy what would otherwise be completely horrible things when they are encased, physically and usually metaphorically, in protective frames. His example is a tiger in a cage. In the cage, the tiger is a source of excitement because you can marvel at it safely. Outside of it, the tiger is a source of anxiety because odds are you're about to get mauled and or eaten. Applying this to horror movies, we experience excitement from this content because we understand that what we're seeing isn't really happening in our vicinity. The sight of a ghostly woman crawling out of a television screen will trigger your fight or flight response and the release of adrenaline, which is intense. You experience physical arousal. Your heart beats faster, you start breathing faster, and you generally feel more awake, more alive. People who crave novelty and new experiences can vicariously live through what it's like to be abducted and tortured by a psychotic murderer. And for some, there's even a sense of accomplishment from having experienced a horror film. Beyond the personal motivations for enjoying horror movies, there's research that shows that experiencing them with other people may have certain benefits. As early as the 1970s, Research showed that experiencing fear with another person can make that person more attractive. Again, horror movies heighten physical arousal, and that intensity extends to whatever else you may already be feeling, like attraction to your date. Research has also shown that even when horror movies don't facilitate romance, they strengthen and even form the basis of friendships because of the release of oxytocin, the hormone that facilitates social bonding. When you watch horror movies with friends, you're experiencing all that stress together and helping each other get through it. And when you leave the theater and talk about what happened, relax over a midnight snack, and laugh at each other for screaming or flinching, most people experience a rush of endorphins, those feel good hormones you get that bust stress. If I still haven't convinced you to give horror movies a chance, I understand, and I hope I see you next month. For the choir I've been preaching to and people who are willing to give this a chance, welcome. Let's begin. Are you near a window right now? Is it a clear night? If you look up, you can probably still catch the full moon, which came up 2 nights ago. Yes, you're guessing right. We are opening with the werewolf portion of our list, friends. Buckle up. These films are scares for all moon phases. I first saw Late Phases one night in 2015, before a big criminal trial. I was nervous about the trial and wanted to distract myself. What better way than horror, right? The full moon was out, and I was feeling brave, so I booted up my laptop and told myself I would be sufficiently worn out by midnight, for sure. The film ended before midnight, true enough, but I didn't sleep a wink. Like all great horror films, there is more to the story than just the werewolf. So Will, played by the guy from Sweet Home, Alabama, not the lead, one of the really funny supporting characters, Ethan Embry. Yeah, that guy. That guy plays Will, and he has a strained relationship with his father, Ambrose. The actor of Ambrose you'll probably recognize from Stakeland, Nick D'Amici. Anyway, Ambrose has gone blind. Unable to provide proper care for him because of other commitments, Will brings Ambrose to a pleasant retiree community up in the woods. It would all be fine, except there's a werewolf stalking the community, and soon Ambrose has more on his mind than just reconnecting with Will. Don't get me wrong, the emotional core of the movie is sincere and truly moving. But make no mistake, this is a werewolf film, and the staples of the genre are all there. The menacing prowling that precedes an attack, gore, the reveal, the transformation, all underscored by the terrifying premise that the werewolf is hunting senior citizens. I'm 34, and I am not down for a werewolf encounter of any sort. Can you imagine how I'd feel if I had to fight one off in my 60s? There is one scene in the film that has stayed with me for years, and it's giving me a sick stomach even now as I recall this. Watch this one in daylight with company, guys. This is probably the freshest take on the subgenre in a while. The Wolf of Snow Hollow isn't your typical entry into this subgenre. Most, as in 3 of the 6 films on this list, fall within the serious creature feature category. The other two arguably fall into the category of camp. The Wolf of Snow Hollow is a fresh blend of the classic werewolf genre tropes and black comedy that will manage to jolt a few laughs out of you in unexpected moments. Deputy Sheriff John Marshall, played by writer and director Jim Cummings, is having a tough time. On top of battling his personal demons, he has to navigate tense relationships with his ex wife and daughter, as well as tend to his ailing father, Sheriff Hadley, who was played by Robert Forster in his final performance. When bodies start piling up and rumors of a wolfman swirl through winter, it's all John can do to hold on to his sanity while he races to catch the killer. You'll spot a few other familiar faces. Ricky Lindholm, whom you might have seen in The Big Bang Theory and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, in an unexpectedly serious role, and Jimmy Tatro in yet another bro role. The biggest star, however, is arguably the wolf. Trust me, you haven't seen one quite like this one. The Wolf of Snow Hollow is also unique in that it involves actual modern law enforcement being pitted against the monster. If you've ever wondered what would happen if cops actually took on a werewolf case, this film might give you some idea. Yeah, it's not really comforting. But it makes a hell of a lot more sense than just ordinary folk having to fight the monster. This movie is for when you want your werewolf alongside a hefty serving of claustrophobia. I have a great love of trains, especially in England. There's nothing quite like plunking down by a window seat and letting your mind disappear into the countryside. The foregoing is, of course, contingent on me taking a train in daylight. Nighttime is a whole other story, and if you throw a full moon and foul weather into the mix, it's a big no thank you. I will sleep at the station if I have to. Unfortunately for Joe, played by Ed Spielers of Aragon fame, he works as a train guard and has no choice but to take that night train shift. Shout out to Brett Goldstein's brief turn as an oily supervisor. Along for the ride are several notable faces, from scream queens to romantic leads, who all have the misfortune of still being on the train when it breaks down in the middle of a forest. If that isn't bad enough, the deer that ran onto the tracks and, ended up wrecking the train journey, it wasn't really suicidal, and now the thing that it was trying to escape from needs a new dinner option, or 11. Howl will by turns horrify you, piss you off, and get you screaming with frustration. Whatever your experience, the lone guarantee is that you will not be bored. Make way for the unquestionable daddy of the subgenre. After all the nightmares this film induced, it's hard to believe that this technically falls into the comedy horror genre. An American Werewolf in London was originally conceived as a campy horror movie John Landis drew up on a gig in then Yugoslavia. The conceptual roots of the story are definitely clear in the film itself. It's easy to see the Romani inspiration for the scared, mistrustful villagers who are both aware of the danger in the moors but reluctant to discuss it with outsiders. Everything that happens in the first half hour of the movie, the tourists wandering around at night on a full moon, the savage attack, the aftermath, and the cover up, if this film didn't invent those tropes, then it certainly did a good job of collating them all. For those who haven't yet seen this 80s classic, a synopsis. David and Jack are backpacking through the moors and, despite ominous warnings from locals, wander around on the night of the full moon and draw the attention of a savage beast who mauls them both. The consequences of this attack bind both to a deeply tragic fate that comes to fruition when the next full moon rises. It's hard to overstate just how iconic this film is. Part of the reason that it was deemed too frightening to be a fully camp movie is the fact that its special effects were groundbreaking, earning it the first ever Academy Award for Best Makeup, and included the scariest transformation scene in werewolf movie history. If you haven't already seen it, you need to in order to know what I'm talking about. If you have seen it, then you know what I'm talking about, and there really isn't much more to be said. Either way, there's time this Halloween to see this film. If the previous film was the subgenre daddy, I guess this one counts as the mommy. There was something in the air in 1981 because The Howling was released alongside An American Werewolf in London and Wolfen. While all three films have their merits, there's a reason that Wolfen isn't on this list, at least this year. I'll leave aside numerical discussions of which film is superior. The difference between An American Werewolf in London and The Howling come down to what the filmmakers decided to emphasize. Story wise, I think that The Howling has more to offer, perhaps because it's based on a book trilogy that is also well worth a read. Karen White helps the police catch a serial killer but suffers serious trauma from the incident. Her doctor sends her and her husband off to a special community to recover. But what do you know? The retreat isn't exactly what she signed up for. And instead of focusing on recovery, Karen now has to do her best to stay alive. Effects wise, it's still pretty badass, especially one scene involving a werewolf in an office. Unfortunately, the terror of that scene isn't really achieved elsewhere in the film, and there is at least one scene where it's clear that the production team ran out of either time or money or both. When you learn that the special effects head of The Howling left the project for An American Werewolf in London, you'll think, yeah, that tracks. Tonally, it has a few laughs and cutesy references, but this is overall a terrifying film, occasionally shoddy effects considered. To tie this back to the metaphor we use to refer to this and An American Werewolf in London, one of those films may be the daddy of all werewolf movies, but I know which film scares me more. To close this first part of the list, time for a fun one. Closing out the week of the werewolf is by far the most fun entry, 2021's Werewolves Within. Yes, like the Ubisoft game. Set in a sleepy mountain town during the winter, the film follows forest ranger Finn Wheeler, whose new posting puts him smack dab in the middle of a fight for the town's soul. See, a businessman wants to build a pipeline that will cut right through the town, and some residents want to sell while others don't. Before the matter can be settled, a snowstorm blows up, and with it, apparently, a werewolf. Tonally, the film harkens back to whodunits like 1985's Clue and more recently Hot Fuzz from 2007. Though it's suspenseful and occasionally truly frightening, you'll still spend most of the film laughing. Also, like both earlier movies, the fast pace and compact storytelling helps this movie stand up to multiple viewings. In fact, the climax of the movie gets better with every rewatching, and I don't say that lightly. I'm the girl who's notorious in my friend circles for watching certain movies every day for over a year. Break the moonstruck terror with this movie. If you're as big a fan of this subgenre as I am, I'm sure you'll have a list of werewolf movies that I didn't include, as well as arguments for why those films are superior to the ones on this list. For example, I went back and forth about whether I should include 2021's The Cursed, also known as Eight for Silver, but despite the film's many strengths, including strong performances and great atmosphere, it didn't stick the landing for me, so I opted to leave it out this time. Same goes for 2010's The Wolfman, and I'm a devout fan of both Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins, so that was a very tough call. I'm not saying that films not on this list are bad. This is just a completely arbitrary compilation of films I think you'd have fun watching or rewatching this month. That being said, this platform does invite feedback, so if there are any werewolf movies you really like that I didn't mention, feel free to leave a comment. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and I hope you'll be back with us next week for the second part of our list. Bye, kids! Blue moon. What's the next line?